Welcome back, fight fans. We're here for yet another episode of the Shootin' the Shit podcast here on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, as well as Combat Press, MMA Intel, and every other platform this show is hosted on. I, of course, am your host, Riley Kontek, and we're here with yet another great guest. But before we get to him, obviously want to plug the sponsor. If you're in the greater Illinois area looking for home construction or home improvement projects, head over to Facebook.com and check out Cornelius & Sons. Get in contact with Raul. He will help you out with any of your home improvement needs. All right, without further ado, we have an excellent guest on the show today. He is currently on the Pfl 2021 roster for their upcoming season in the light heavyweight division. He's also a former UFC middleweight and also a Glory kickboxing veteran. We have Chris Camozzi on the show today. Chris, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. Sunday morning and got a little bit of sleep. I'm feeling good, ready to do this.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, everyone. From what I've been told, everyone needs sleep before they do this show because it's just such a such a stressor. So before we talk specifically about you, one of the hot topics in MMA right now is the fact that Gina Carano was fired from The Mandalorian. I don't watch the show. I'm not a Star Wars nerd, but she was fired from the show for some comments she's made on social media. Do you have any thoughts on this? Was this the right thing to do, or are you anti the firing of Gina Carano on The Mandalorian?
You know, I haven't seen The Mandalorian. But I can't remember what she said, so I don't want to comment too much on that. But I think it should be like freedom of speech, right? People are allowed to say things. This whole firing people over social media, I disagree with. All I can really say is that some of these celebrities and stuff should maybe just not be putting it out there. But then again, just because they're celebrities doesn't mean that they shouldn't be allowed to say what they think.
Yeah, I think the comparison she had made was the political polarization to the point that I think basically she was making a Jews in Germany comparison, which probably wasn't comparable, but I think the message was lost on the actual instance for what she was saying. She had said something like it wasn't the Nazi soldiers who were the ones that were ratting out their neighbors and trying to get them, arrested or whatever. It was, children, it was their neighbors, it was et cetera. That was what her point was. So I think the message of her point was probably lost on the fact that it was compared with something that wasn't comparable, because you can't really compare cancel culture with actually the seizing of Jewish people and the Holocaust and things of that nature. But I think the big issue was the hypocrisy. She gets fired for making that comparison when actually one of her castmates made a similar comparison a year or two ago, and he keeps his job.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a world of hypocrisy now. It's a crazy time, man. I disagree with a ton of it, and if the point she was trying to make is what I think, about how like divided we are, then I get it. Because this country seems more divided than it ever was before. And I don't think that revolves around the presidency like most people do. I'm big on these politicians, man, are just playing games with all of our lives. So we can go on and on about that.
We'll save that for the politics podcast. So now let's get specifically to you. When you talk about Gina Carano's situation all day, you've recently switched gyms. So what prompted that? And for those of us who are not in the loop, what gym had you head off to?
Yeah, so I was at Factory X for a long time. I kind of found that gym. But, it was just time for a change, some differences of opinion, stuff like that. So I moved on, and I'm at Genesis Training Center now. I bounce around a little bit, but my head coach is going to be Jake Ramos out of Genesis now.
Very good. So you're now this. I don't know why I'm thinking of this right now. Did you also own an MMA store or something like that on the side?
I did. That's no longer around. And, I can't say that I'm upset about it. I was ready to do something else there as well. COVID had a big impact on it. And, I always adjust. I always shift my life. And, I was working for part of COVID for a bit. And, I still do some side work here and there, but mostly just full-time fighting. And I love that. It doesn't feel like work.
Absolutely. So okay, so I wasn't losing my mind. Actually, I did know that one. So, so now you just mentioned COVID. Obviously, it affected a lot of fighters, especially fighters who weren't in the UFC, because UFC for a while was the only show in town. Even Bellator wasn't running cards at that point. Obviously, the PFL season got canceled. So having that year off, like how do you think that's affected you? And maybe was it good to get the downtime, maybe to recover and move on?
Money wise, it sucked. And I love fighting, but I think it was a good thing for me. As far as like my body healed up, man, this is like the leanest I've been, the strongest I've been. I spent most of COVID just lifting and doing stuff like that since we couldn't really train. So I put on a lot of power, strength. I was lifting 5-6 days a week because everything was closed. There was nothing going on, so literally I would just work out twice a day. And now, like I said, I'm way leaner. I think I've put on a lot more like explosive power. I focused on things that I never really had time to kind of build and do, because it's really hard to do that stuff when you're in training camp all the time. And I've always been stringing fights together back to back. So it's taken that step back, let me work a ton of stuff that, I didn't really have time to do to fit in.
For sure. And then one of the other things you did after, you left the UFC was you took some fights with Glory Kickboxing. So, what was the logic behind taking the Glory Kickboxing bouts as opposed to, taking MMA bouts?
Glory offered me a good contract. They approached me right after the UFC, and, it just seemed like a fun challenge actually to do a different sport in kickboxing. I'd never competed in kickboxing before, obviously I've always trained it for MMA. And then I would train with Dustin Jacoby for his Glory fights. I would be his sparring partner a ton of times. So it just seemed like something fresh, something new, a fun challenge. I'm actually still signed with Glory. I think I've got 2 more years on my contract, but they're not using Americans right now. They're not flying Americans as far as I know. And I've got this PFL tournament coming up, so I'm not really risking any kind of injury for this $1 million tournament.
Right, and my coach is Richard Abraham, who also fights for Glory, and that's the problem right now is that they can't get any fights because they're not running shows in America. Do you think Glory will ever come back to the United States? I mean, I really, from my experience, I've done press at a few of them. They don't have the hugest crowds. I don't think kickboxing is as popular as it is in Europe and Asia. Do you think Glory's going to even bother coming back, or do you think they'll just stick around in Europe?
Well, first off, shout out to Richard Abraham, man. I'm a big fan of watching him fight. I always love all of his Glory fights. That's awesome that you get to train with him. I can't picture them coming back to the U.S., but who knows? They continued to do it, and I wondered why. I was happy they did because I didn't have to fly all over the place. But, I'm kind of with you. I can't really picture them coming back over. They sell out big arenas in Holland and stuff like that. So it never made sense to me why they would come and, kind of have terrible attendance here when kickboxing is so big in Europe. But I'd see they were trying to build the market and, who knows, maybe they do again. I have no idea. I know they sold, right?
Yeah, I think some conglomerate, some other group bought them, but yeah, it seems like, like you were saying, Netherlands is definitely where their bread and butter is, and now that, France has legalized combat sports, sporting events, obviously France is a big place for kickboxing as well, so it's really hard to see them coming back, because, like I said, and actually when I had Dustin Jacoby on the show, he was on one of the cards that I was doing press for in Chicago, and, the lower bowl was mostly filled, but the upper deck, there was nobody, and it was just tough. You're just surprised that doesn't have as much leeway or as much fandom in the United States as it does in Europe.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy too because Glory's exciting, man. Like I always say, you get all these people at UFC events that boo when they hit the ground or when they're clinched up, and I'm like, these people should be fans of Glory if that's what they want. If they just want like standing and brawling and technical striking, but it never seemed to translate over like you think it would.
Right. I think one of the things that's starting to click, though, maybe, I don't know if it's the gloves. I don't know if the gloves have anything to do with it, but I think when they're doing Muay Thai bouts with 4-ounce, the MMA gloves, I think that would be, it's not bare knuckle, so it doesn't look as grisly, but it's definitely, more, I don't know if you'd say exciting or more interesting because they have the lighter gloves on, which means less padding than, 12 to 16-ounce gloves.
Yeah, shout out to John Wayne Parr. I feel like he's the one that started that, right? Was the cage Muay Thai,
Yeah.
the small gloves, and then he was doing it in a cage, or still is doing it. And I remember seeing that years ago, thinking that was an awesome idea. Yeah, I don't know if it's the gloves that deter people. Those gloves aren't very big if you see them in person. I actually feel like I can hit harder with those gloves than I can MMA gloves because they protect your hand just a little bit.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you think that's because of the hand protection?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's so easy to damage your hands in MMA. Those little gloves don't save your hand at all. They don't really pad anything.
No.
So with boxing gloves, man, you can, those 10-ounce boxing gloves that we use in Glory, you can just wing punches, and there's just enough padding to not totally shatter your hand, plus that tape under.
Right, and I think if anybody knows about broken hands, it's Fedor. Hasn't he broken both of his hands like 10 times?
Yeah, I think when you hit like that guy, it's pretty easy to break your hand.
That's a good point. When you hit as hard as that dude does, you're bound to get a boxer's break or two. So now, big thing coming up with you, like you were mentioning, was the PFL tournament. You know, we got 6 weight classes. We're going to have Johnny Case on the show in a couple of weeks to talk about the lightweight division that he's in. But let's talk about the light heavyweight division specifically because that's the division that you're in. So just taking a look at the roster, 9 of the 10 fighters have been announced. So before we talk about the field, do we have any idea who the 10th fighter is?
Your guess is as good as mine.
I'm just trying to think of any free agent light heavyweights that would be, the obvious 10th person. But the one I was thinking of was Anthony Johnson, and he went to Bellator. So
yeah, he would have been a crazy addition. I'm sure Bellator offered him a ton of money to come over there. There's some exciting fights for him. I have no idea who the 10th person can be. My best guess would be like some foreign guy that they're making sure that they can get over here first.
Yeah, since there's no Russians in the light heavyweight division, I think it's going to be a Russian, maybe, a guy we've seen in the past, maybe Rashid Yusupov or something. But yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that maybe the 10th hasn't been announced, but they have an idea. They're just not sure if they can get him over here with the whole COVID protocols and stuff.
100% true. And a lot of Russian fighters do train in the United States, but the ones that don't, it's probably tougher to get them in unless you fly them in a couple months in advance or whatever. So we're taking a look at the roster here. We have it up. Maybe we'll put a screen. I'm probably going to be too lazy to do any graphics. But so you got yourself. You got Cesar Ferreira, UFC veteran. You got Martin Hamlet, who's a prospect from Europe. Jordan Johnson, another UFC veteran. Tom Lawler, who's actually returning. He's a pro wrestler now, and he's now coming back. Smilinho Rama, who was in 2 seasons ago. I don't believe he was in the last season. The defending champion, Emiliano Sordi, who I know you've said a few things about. Dan Spawn and Jordan Young. So specifically with Sordi being the defending champion, is that the person you want to fight right off the bat?
When they asked me, I was like, absolutely. Then I see that roster come out. There's a bunch of exciting ones. It doesn't really matter to me because with the tournament format, we'll probably all see each other at some point. Right. But I do like the Sordi matchup, just for the sole fact that he's the champion. He ran through the first time. He did a great job. There's nothing bad I can say about the guy. He's super talented, and it just seemed like an interesting matchup. My whole career, I've always taken tough fights, so with the tournament format, why not fight the best guy first? But honestly, there's some fun ones in there. I'd be happy with any opponent. I'm happy to just be in the tournament because it seems like it's going to be a lot of fun.
For sure, and there's a lot of good matchups. You're right, a lot of exciting fighters, a lot of guys, and to maybe to your benefit, a lot of guys that like to strike, since you obviously like to strike yourself. So I mean, there's a lot of that. What do you think about Tom Lawler returning from a couple years off from the cage and doing pro wrestling? How do you think he fares entering the tournament?
I don't know. It's going to depend on how well his body is. I know pro wrestling can be pretty rough. I was excited to see him in there. I've always liked Tom. Like I said, I'm acquaintances with a few guys in this tournament, but, this is the business that we're in. But I was happy to see Tom Lawler back in MMA. I always thought he was a real good fighter. And then, he took off on the pro wrestling stuff, which seemed right up his alley. He's perfect for it. But he, I love his antics, his weigh-ins, all of that. He's a funny guy. And like I said, he's always been a real good fighter. So I'm happy to see him come back because I'm sure he's still got some more in the tank.
For sure, and I think a lot of fans are happy to see Tom back in the cage. Is there a matchup that you're dying to have right off the bat? Like, who's the first person you want to take on in this tournament or season?
Man, I'm not sure. I got to look at it again, but like I said, I like all of them. I know that what's his name, Jordan Young was asking to fight me first. I don't mind doing that. If you ask to fight me, I'm in. He doesn't have the same kind of experience. He's tough, but he doesn't have that same kind of experience. So, that I can bring in there. Who else? There's a few guys that I hadn't heard of. I know you said that Hamlet.
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Yeah, he's a wrestler really from Norway.
Yeah, I think he was like a Norwegian Olympian or something like that, which makes it real interesting. I'm sure he's a big, strong guy. Cesar Ferreira, him and I were supposed to fight in the UFC a long time ago. There's a lot of fun ones, I think stylistically, everybody that's in that tournament makes it a fun one. There's not, I don't know what the words I'm looking for here. Everybody in there's pretty well-rounded, and I think it makes for exciting fights, especially when I look at everybody matching up against each other. I don't see any boring fights in there.
No, I think that Ray Sefo and the boys did a really good job of assembling the rosters, and not just in your weight class, in most weight classes. I think they did a really, really good job, and especially with the women's lightweight class, because there's really not a lot to work with there, and they still got a decent roster. I still think Kayla Harrison's going to run through everybody, but they put together a decent enough roster given the circumstances. So, all right, let's talk about this weekend's UFC card. We got a pay-per-view coming up, UFC 259. It is headlined by 3 title fights: bantamweight, women's featherweight, and light heavyweight. Let's talk about those 3 fights specifically. We'll start off with the first bout on that card. It's a bantamweight title. You got the champion, Peter Yan. He will be taking on, I believe this will be his first title defense. He'll be taking on Aljamain Sterling. It's been a long rumored bout. It's finally going to take place. So what do you think about this fight? And if you want to do a breakdown, and if you have a prediction, send it our way.
Man, so Aljo is one of my longtime friends. When I go train at Weidman's gym out there, a lot of times I live with him. So there's no way I can pick against him. Plus, he's a great fighter, man. That kid, if he gets on you, he's a backpack. His submissions, his wrestling is so good. Yeah, I mean, you've seen him just run through guys, submitting them. It brings a real interesting style, I think, because Peter Yan obviously wants to keep it on the feet. But I don't know if he can keep Aljo off him for 25 minutes. Obviously, Aljo had, that one loss to Marlon Moraes. It was super unlucky he dipped into that kick. But other than that, people have had a hell of a time keeping him off of him. So with that 25 minutes to work, I could see him taking down Yan. And I think if he gets him down, I don't know if Yan gets back up.
Yeah, Sterling really, really heavy on top. Sterling was a guy that before he came in the UFC, when I was doing my scouting reports back in the day, was a guy I said would be UFC champion at some point. So he has a chance to do that here. Yan, since entering the UFC, 6-0. His latest win coming off of Jose Aldo, and that was actually a 5th-round knockout. So he went the full 5, basically almost the full 5 rounds with Aldo. When it comes to Sterling, you're right. Since that loss to Moraes, it was just, timing is everything, right? He threw that kick at the perfect time. He's been on a tear as well. He's won 5 straight, 2 by submission, 3 by decision. He's actually coming off of a submission over Corey Sandhagen, who probably isn't far off from a title shot himself. So I am going to agree with you on this one. I think Sterling is the new UFC champion at the end of the night. I think his wrestling is too much. And Peter Yan is good at defending takedowns. I don't know if he's good at defending takedowns for 25 minutes.
Yeah, and Aljo brings just a different kind of funky style to that wrestling, too. He's the funk master.
Right, exactly.
They call him that for a reason. He's not just straight power double legs. He's got a lot of unorthodox wrestling, similar to Ben Askren was. It wasn't just all explosive, blow you out of the water, double leg. So I think he brings a lot of problems to Yan. And obviously you said Yan went 5 rounds with Aldo, but that was mostly a striking match. Right. So 25 minutes of fighting off takedowns is a lot harder than just kickboxing.
Right. And then, like you said, and then plus you have to figure Sterling probably has the athleticism advantage as well. There's not too many guys in the 135-pound division that probably are as athletic as he is.
Yeah, he's an athletic freak. And then doing jiu-jitsu with Matt Serra and those guys, he's solid on the ground.
Yeah. Can you imagine Matt Serra being your coach and just having to hear that goddamn New York accent for 2 hours?
I love it. He's one of my favorite people. So I train at his gym every time I go out there. 3 times a week I'm at his gym, and he's an amazing coach, actually.
Absolutely.
He breaks down positions and everything, and he's so much fun. That guy walks in the door, and he's already just yelling, and he's funny. he makes that attitude and atmosphere like a lot of fun, actually.
Absolutely. I think he's one of the better, probably one of the most underrated coaches in the sport. But yeah, at least he's not a stereotypical New Yorker or anything like that.
Yeah, he's hilarious. He's one of my favorite people.
Absolutely. All right, so then we head to the second title fight. We have a women's featherweight title, which, in my opinion, I don't even know why they have it anymore. They only have like 4 women in the division. You have Amanda Nunes, the multi-divisional champion, taking on Megan Anderson. Same question posed to you. What do you think about this fight, and who do you got?
Man, so I know both of them actually, but I gotta stick with Nunes, and she is a killer. People used to joke about Ronda Rousey, or people weren't joking. People actually believed that Ronda Rousey could beat some of the guys. Amanda Nunes, I think, could actually go in there and fight some of the guys. She is a beast, man. She's got the power. She's got the jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, everything. She's a full package, I think. I could see her holding on to both belts for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know how long the featherweight division has. It's just really hard to have, quantify having a division where there's only 4 people signed to it. And it's not like they're signing more, But yeah, Nunes is leaps and bounds ahead of every fighter. She's beaten everybody. You talk about Cyborg, Ronda, Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, Valentina Shevchenko. She's beat them all. There's a argument to be made that she's the greatest female fighter of all time.
I think 100% she is.
Absolutely. And some people might say Cyborg. Cyborg has longevity. She's been in the sport as long as she has. And some could say she's a little bit past her prime when she fought Amanda Nunes. That could be an argument. But yeah, as much as I love watching Megan Anderson fight because I really enjoy watching her striking, I don't see how she beats Amanda Nunes here.
Yeah. I think the ground game is where it becomes a problem too. Amanda is just so good on the ground. Megan's no slouch, but Amanda's just been at it a lot longer. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. I'm excited for that one too.
Who has better tattoos, Megan Anderson's sleeve or your heart grenade tattoo?
Oh, God, I don't know. I can't remember. She used to train at our gym, but I can't even remember what her sleeve looks like.
That's a lot of.
I got to pick mine, though, right? It's on my chest, so I should just pick mine without seeing hers.
Yeah, not to kiss your ass, but your heart grenade tattoo might be one of my favorite tattoos of anybody, period. Not to kiss your ass. First off, everyone knows I'm not an ass kisser, but secondly, yeah, that is legitimately one of my favorite tattoos.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
No problem, buddy. All right, so we head to the main event. It's a light heavyweight championship bout between middleweight champion Izzy Adesanya and Jan Blachowicz, the light heavyweight champion. Before we talk about the breakdown, do you think it was a little soon to be having a champion versus champion fight, seeing that Blachowicz hasn't even defended his title and Izzy still has some work to do in the middleweight division?
I don't know. It's fun, I like that the UFC. I'm sure you remember back in the day, the UFC was very this, and this. They didn't always put on the fights the fans wanted. So I actually like that they're doing some fun things. Izzy wants it, and why not? If nobody else is ready, I mean, who else was there for Izzy to fight at the moment that would be fight ready? I know Glover's probably next in line, but was he ready to fight again this soon? It makes it fun. And I think Izzy could beat him, honestly. That guy is a wizard on the feet. He's hard to hit. He's quick. He's long. He's not small for 205. But Blachowicz, man, he kind of came out of nowhere for me. I hadn't even seen him fight, I think, until that maybe one fight before the interim title fight, because I just kept seeing the name, but I was like, I can't see him fighting. It's an interesting fight because Adesanya has all the star power. And, if I went outside right now and asked somebody about Jan Blachowicz, they would be like, who's that?
Must not live
so
in
it's
Poland,
kind of
man.
It's kind of win-win for the UFC because if Izzy becomes the 2-division champion, he's already a star. If Blachowicz beats him, maybe that boosts him up and gives him some of that star power that he needs for them to market him.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that you're right. For the UFC, this is win-win. If Izzy wins, like you said, he's already a megastar, and if Blachowicz wins, that gives him far more credibility. He's a guy that I could like I said, I was making the joke earlier, about Poland. He's a guy that could definitely sell an arena out in Poland if they ever, if we ever go back to doing arena shows in the near future. But Blachowicz, you were saying you hadn't heard a lot about him until a couple fights ago. He was a guy that, again, before the UFC, I looked at him and I said, this guy has a lot of potential to be in the title picture at some point. Now, I never said he'd be champion, and obviously he became that. But you talk about, first off, a guy who hits as hard as he does. I mean, that dude is all power, and he's got a fucking head like a beach ball. And, so he can take a punch too. So. But with that fight, who do you think? Do you have Adesanya or do you have Blachowicz?
I'm going to go with Adesanya. I think momentum's behind him. Like I said, he's like a rising star here. He is a star now, but he's just been on a tear, and I think he's just really caught his groove, and he's feeling it now. He's comfortable in there. And, Blachowicz is a great striker, right, in MMA, and Adesanya is a world-level striker in kickboxing and everything else. I got to go with Adesanya.
So, okay, we'll have a nice little split here. I will actually go with Blachowicz. I think you have a case of power versus precision, and a lot of times I would take precision, but I think if Blachowicz even lands one big shot, I don't think Izzy can handle it. I'm not saying Izzy's, soft or anything like that, but that's just how much respect I have for Blachowicz's power. And, I mean, we saw that with Dominic Reyes, just blasted through him.
Yeah, I mean, you could be right. It's another exciting one. The UFC fights are always exciting. Any fight is, because any night anybody can win. People don't understand that. Just because you win one night doesn't mean that you were better or that 10 out of 10 times you would win. MMA is a crazy sport. It's not like football with the odds really mean that much. It just takes one slip up, one punch, one kick, and, it's over.
100% true. And if you ever, what was it? Sometimes you're a plus 900 underdog, and then you just, you slip a punch out of nowhere, knock a guy out, and you went from being a plus 900 underdog to having your hand raised. So you're absolutely right. The sport's crazy, and anything can happen. But definitely looking forward to that card. A lot of good fights on there, even outside the title fights. So. All right, Chris. Well, we've taken enough of your time today. Before we let you go, I will let you plug yourself capriciously. Feel free to whore yourself out. Where can we find you? Anybody you'd like to thank? The floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I got my gym going. I run my own gym here at Resilience Code in Denver. So if you're in Denver and you want to come train, hit me up or stop in, check us out. You can find me on Instagram. It's at Chris Camozzi 7. Don't ask me why the 7's on there. I think Chris Camozzi was taken. And on Twitter, it's at Chris Camozzi. So you can find me on there. You can find me on the Reddit boards. I'm all over the place. I love this sport, so I'm always on like those forums and stuff. But yeah, other than that, man, I appreciate your time, and this is fun. I like those breakdowns.
Excellent. And, we thank you for coming on the show. The show is nothing without the fighters. So, again, thank you for your time. I will now whore myself out as I usually do. You can check me out on Twitter and Facebook where I post these shows for my YouTube channel. This show is also on the Loudmouth MMA podcast platforms, Apple Play, SoundCloud, the whole 9 yards. Also, you can check it out on Combat Press. Shout out to Rob Tatum and Brian Henderson for continuing to put up with my ass. And like I said, my YouTube channel mostly has MMA podcast, but if you want to see me get hit in the nuts with a football, there's that videos up there too. So just check all those things out. So again, Chris, thank you very much for having giving us your time and a lot of interesting stuff. Really enjoyed the fight breakdown. So for Chris Camozzi, I am Riley Kontek saying continue watching the fights, continue watching this show. Go fuck yourselves. Good night.